let's dive in and have a great time learning about audit evidence, learning about the types of audit evidence, and how we're going to use it, how we're going to collect it, how we're going to come to a great opinion within an audit. First off, let's read the objective. The objective here of the auditor is to plan and perform the audit. We've seen and heard that many times before. To obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Wow, there we go. Now we're going to see how we're going to do that in this lesson. That is sufficient to support the opinion expressed in the report. You can't just give an opinion. You have to have some backing for it. You have to have some rationale and evidence. The auditor uses their own professional judgment to determine if evidence is sufficient and appropriate. Now, obviously, there are checklists. Obviously, the auditor is going to have certain requirements on audit evidence to verify and corroborate what the auditor tests. But in general, the auditor is going to use their professional judgment. Yes, there are firm checklists. Yes, there are AICPA generated checklists. This is just what we need to cover, because an audit could really just be an audit, a day-long audit of a very small company, right? In that case, you may not have a checklist for that. This section provides guidance about concepts underlying the third standard of fieldwork. The auditor must obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence by performing audit procedures to afford a reasonable basis for an opinion regarding the financial statements under audit. This is taken from the AICPA's authoritative literature. I want to make sure we're including that for your benefit. Diving in a little bit further, audit evidence consists of both information that supports and corroborates, which fancy way of just saying verify, management's assertions regarding the financial statements or internal control over financial reporting, and information that contradicts such assertions. We're going to dive into the assertions. We do that in a couple lessons throughout the audit course, much more in the various cycles we've got. But here, it's a great time to do it because the assertions of completeness, existence, etc., we want to make sure that we're getting the proper evidence to corroborate those specific assertions. When using information produced by the company as audit evidence, which first off, probably not the best source of audit evidence. The best source of audit evidence is from a third party where the client cannot edit it or do anything to modify it. The auditor should evaluate whether the information is sufficient and appropriate. Is it enough? And is it appropriate, meaning are you using something generated by management to verify something that management said? That would not be appropriate. Is it sufficient and appropriate for the purposes of the audit by performing procedures to, well, first off, test the accuracy and completeness of the information? So I think that's pretty solid and pretty straightforward, right? We want to make sure that anything that's given to us, if they give us a schedule that has the amount of debt listed out, well, a good option there is to get a listing of debt from whoever they owe the money to. Or test the controls over the accuracy and completeness of that information and evaluate whether the information is sufficiently precise and detailed for the purposes of the audit. That's going to be in testing, and we're going to dive more deeply into that throughout this entire lesson. What is audit evidence? Right, we could talk about it. It's pieces of documentation, different schedules, different statements made by individuals that are third parties. Sampling and audit evidence are pretty well intertwined. So what's our process here? Our process is we are going to sample, tying into that sampling lesson, we're going to sample population, take, let's say, 10 transactions out of 100 transactions. And this is something that I did during my time auditing as well. We take that sample of 10 transactions, and then you're going to get evidence for it. So let's say this company, this client, has a bunch of investments in other companies, just stock. They hold stock. It's a hedge fund, right? They've got stock A, so they've got some Microsoft stock. They've got some Tesla stock. They've got some Apple stock. They've got stock in all those companies. Now, this is a massive population. They've got stock in 100 companies. We chose just 10. How would I get audit evidence for that? I'm going to possibly look in the Bloomberg terminal. I'm going to Google what's the stock price, try to verify the accuracy of what they list the fair value of that stock is. And also I can call up the broker who holds their stock, say, hey, does this company actually have 3 shares of Tesla, 2 shares of Apple? Making sure that that is accurate as well, that they actually exist. Once you get evidence for the samples, you can check them off, say there's no variance, they're good to go. The financial statements are accurate in that regard. You can move on and test the next line item or balance or transaction. Audit evidence is all the information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the audit opinion is based and it includes the information contained in the accounting records that underlie the financial statements and other information. Meaning, this is going to be bank statements that you get from the bank that the client uses. This is going to be reports generated by the client, reconciliation schedules, items created and maintained by the staff who work at the client, any accountants, any managers, reports they do, reconciliations they do, sign-offs. If a manager signs off on something, that's audit evidence, making sure that internal controls are operating effectively. I'm going to be going through these, and we're going to obviously, as we get more into the lesson, dive much more in depth to these pieces of audit evidence. Now, audit evidence, which is cumulative in nature, includes audit evidence obtained from audit procedures performed during the course of the audit. It may include audit evidence obtained from other sources, such as previous audits, and a firm's quality control procedures for client acceptance and continuance. Well, what is audit evidence? Is it just a bunch of pieces of paper? Is it a bunch of statements from individuals? Let's talk about what that looks like even more, right? We've got bank statements, which are from third parties. We've got loan agreements, which should be from third parties as well. We've got accounting records from the client. These are items prepared by accountants that work in the company. Audit evidence is all the information that is used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the audit opinion is based. Awesome. Let's just take that in strides, right? We perform procedures to obtain evidence to make an opinion. And evidence includes the information contained in the accounting records underlying the financial statements and other information. Now, right here, auditors are not expected to examine all information that may exist. Couple points here. A, you're an auditor, you have limited time. Your job here is to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence, meaning you're not going to look at every single document. Additionally, it's not your job to verify the authenticity of documentation. That's something you might see in multiple choice questions. Now, obviously, there could be a forged bank statement. However, if you get it directly from the bank, that's pretty much understood to be the legitimate document. Now, if you get a bank statement from the client could then potentially edit the bank statement. So that would be the situation there. It's not your job, again, to verify the authenticity because you're an auditor. You're not a legal professional. You're not an IT expert who can see if something digitally has been edited. That is not your job, and that is not your responsibility. But your responsibility, again, is to make sure that the process with which you get your documentation is secure. Audit evidence, which is cumulative in nature, meaning it just builds up, right? It builds up. We've got statements from every month, from every week, whatever that may look like. It includes evidence obtained from audit procedures performed during the course of the audit and may include audit evidence obtained from other sources, such as previous audits, and a firm's quality control procedures for client acceptance and continuance. We're going to see how you can use prior audits. We're going to see how maybe a subsidiary was audited of the client, and you can use the audited financial statements of that subsidiary. We're going to see how you can use different reports for internal controls. We've mentioned it in a few lessons, but we have our SOC reports. Diving in, having a good time. Audit evidence, pretty important lesson, and a pretty fun one at that. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.